The upper appendicular skeleton consists of two major parts. It consists of the pectoral girdle, and it also consists of the limb. The axial skeleton, which we've already studied, is the skull, the thoracic cage, and the vertebrae. This provides stability to the human body. The appendicular skeleton, which consists of the arms and the legs, allows much more movement, but isn't as stable as the axial skeleton. The two parts of the upper appendicular skeleton that we will study are the pectoral girdle and the limb. The pectoral girdle consists of the clavicle and the scapula. Clavicle here and scapula. The remainder of this is called the limb, and it consists of the humerus, and then the radius and ulna. Now the radius and ulna are situated side by side, and in anatomical position with the palm up and the thumb out. The radius is on the lateral side and the ulna is on the medial side. But when the hand is rotated, such as turning a doorknob, then the radius becomes more interior and is on the medial side, and the ulna is on the lateral side. So the only way to really identify these is either by their actual structure, where the radius looks like the top of a nail and the ulnus looks like the top of a wrench, or to label them based on where they are with comparison to the hand, because that position does not move. So the bone on the outside in this view and on the thumb side is the radius, whereas the bone on the inside and the pinky is the ulna. They will always remain radius on the thumb side and ulna on the pinky side. The remainder of the bones are these small bones of the hand called the carpals, and they would make up this part of your hand. And then the metacarpals, which make up what you would consider to be the palm of your hand, here, metacarpals, and then phalanges, here. And these will have more specific names in a moment. So we're going to start by taking a closer look at the hand. So here is the image of the hand that you have. Now the two bones here are the radius and the ulna. Again, being on the thumb side, this is the radius. And being on the pinky side, this is the ulna. Now this is the posterior surface of your right hand, so this would be like this. Now these bones are oriented in the same way from the posterior side, the back of the hand. Now these bones all look the same. These carpal bones are very similar. So the way to know the difference is to be able to identify them based on their location, not so much what the bone looks like, because most of the bones look the same. So there are 8 bones, 4 bones in each row, and there are 2 rows. So here, on the proximal side, there are 1, 2, 3, 4 bones. On the distal end, there are 1, 2, 3, 4 bones. So knowing them in order instead of knowing them by their shape is much more beneficial to most doctors and anatomists. So this first bone is called the scaphoid, and it kind of has an S shape as you see here. Scaphoid. Then this is the lunate, as you see here. Lunate. This bone is called the triquitral, and it even has a triangular sort of shape. Triquitral. This is the pisiform. The pisiform is a small, tiny bone that you see on the end. And those 4 bones make up the lower or more proximal row of carpals. Then starting here again on the thumb side, this particular bone is called the trapezium. And some of my students have said, well, this looks almost like a little seat on a trapeze, so they remember trapezium. The trapezium is here. The next bone over, right here, is called the trapezoid. They sound very similar and are often easily confused with each other. The next bone is called the capitate, and it's here. It's very large and kind of rectangular, so this one's a little bit easier to remember. And then this one over here kind of has a round oblong shape. Reminds me of a ham, and it's called hamate, so that helps. Now anatomists and doctors have long had a hard time with these, so they often remember some sort of sentence to help them remember them in a certain location. So one of the sentences suggested by books is Sally left the party to take Kathy home. Sally, scaphoid, left, lunate, the, triquetral, party, pisiform, to, trapezium, take, trapezoid, Kathy, capitate, home, hamate. Now the items that I've colored in blue are your metacarpals, and they can be seen here in this image. Now the metacarpals really make up the palm of your hand and the back of your hand, so they're really right here under the skin, whereas the image always kind of indicates that they're more like your finger, but they're not. You can see from the outline they're underneath the palm of your hand and the back of your hand. So this one right here is called metacarpal, and so is this one, and this one, and this one, and this one. But they are numbered to distinguish them. So this is metacarpal 1 with a Roman numeral 1. This is metacarpal 2 with a Roman numeral 2. Metacarpal 3, metacarpal 4, and metacarpal 5. And again, we use the Roman numerals to indicate them. The next row and all of the following rows are phalanges, fingers. So the first row is considered to be the proximal phalanx. So this is proximal phalanx 1, proximal phalanx 2, again with Roman numerals, proximal phalanx 3, proximal phalanx 4, and proximal phalanx 5. If we look at this model, the proximal phalanx is here, 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 and here. Notice, however, when we get to the thumb, we'll look at it from this view, if we get to the thumb, here's our metacarpal 1, here's our proximal phalanx 1, we don't have 2 more bones, we only have 1. Notice that it's missing the one I've colored in purple. This is called the middle phalanx or middle phalanges, and so there isn't a middle phalange 1. It starts with 2. Middle phalange 2, middle phalange 3, middle phalange 4, and middle phalange 5. And then finally the last one is called distal. Distal phalanx 1, distal phalanx 2, distal phalanx 3, distal phalanx 4, and 5, again with Roman numerals. Distal phalanx 1, distal phalanx 2, distal phalanx 3, distal phalanx 4, and distal phalanx 5. The next portion of the limb that we'll look at is the radius and the ulna. Here's an image of a radius, and here's an image of the radius and the ulna. Here's an actual human radius, and here's a human ulna. Starting out, you can specifically see the differences. The radius looks like the top of a nail, and the ulna looks like the top of a wrench. And your elbow joint is actually created from the ulna fitting with the humerus in this manner. The radius really doesn't make up your elbow joint at all. In fact, it just sits underneath the ulna like this. So it doesn't make the hinge joint that is your elbow. So if we put the two next to each other, let's identify some of their structures. This is the radius, and this is the ulna. This portion is called the head of the radius. And if we have a head of the radius, then we certainly have a neck. Head of the radius, neck of the radius. This projection that you observe here is called the radial tuberosity, and this is actually an attachment point for your bicep muscle. So this is where your bicep muscle attaches. On the proximal portion of the ulna, remember this is where your elbow would be. So this is the proximal end, closer to the point of attachment. Down here is where your hand would be. It would look like this. So again, on the proximal end of the ulna, we have this area that's been carved out called the trochlear notch. This attaches to the trochlea of the humerus that we will learn about very soon. The top of the ulna is called the olecranon process. This is the portion that actually fits into the back of the ulna like this. So this is the olecranon process. The olecranon process is blue in my picture here. The trochlear notch is yellow. And this bottom portion is called the coronoid process. And the coronoid process also is part of the hinge joint, but instead of touching, this is where the olecranon process is touching. The coronoid process actually touches the humerus when you contract or flex your bicep, so when your arm bends upward. Then this narrowing of the ulna is called the neck of the ulna. Throughout the rest of these two bones, they really don't have any distinguishing features through the length of most of the bone. Remember, they're long bones, so they have a medullary cavity within, but they are connected by this sheet of tissue called an interosseous membrane. And where the radius and ulna associate with each other at the proximal end, this is called, and they just barely touch each other right here, this is called the proximal radio-ulnar joint. I think that this is not printed on your guided notes, so the spelling is proximal, P-R-O-X-I-M-A-L. Radio-ulnar is one word, R-A-D-I-O-U-L-N-A-R, joint. Then this down here is the distal radio-ulnar joint, and you can see where they're attached down here. And again, I don't think this one was in your guided notes. So distal, D-I-S-T-A-L, again here in blue. Radio-ulnar, R-A-D-I-O-U-L-N-A-R, that's one word, joint. Then the remaining features of the radius and ulna are these styloid processes. They're bumps on the edge. These are attachment points for muscles of your hand. So this is the styloid process of the radius, colored in blue. And this is the styloid process of the ulna, colored in orange. Continue after this video in applying your knowledge to compare the radius, ulna, and the hands to bones of other species.